that's kind of how I deal with what happened to us, is I put a purpose behind it. So my research focuses on the impact of trauma and community violence in Black neighborhoods, which is still a huge issue today. And I talk to people who are the survivors, so people like me who have had someone who has been murdered, and talk about like the aftermath of what happens and all the systems they have to interact with and everything that they go through, and try to figure out ways that we can really help this population of individuals, because the support is really lacking. And so that's how I deal with it. I put a purpose behind it, and it really has inspired the work that I'm doing, because I feel like that's the best way to honor my aunt's life.
Wow, that is amazing. That's kind of a great mission, is putting turning your pain into purpose. Everybody, this is Jaime Matthews. I am with Real Life Coaching and the founder of the Trauma Survivor Ambassador Program. Today we are on episode 2 of the Survive to Thrive Warrior Voices podcast. And I am so excited about today's guest. We have a super special guest. Her name is Dr. Kendall Morris. She is Mrs. Michigan Captivating 2025. Welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast today. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are super grateful for everything you're doing. Not only does Dr. Morris do so much work in her community, she is a professor at MSU, is that correct, in social work? And she is a trauma survivor ambassador. So we are going to dig deep today about trauma and all the things that Dr. Morris may have witnessed in her life, any type of advice and inspiration that she has to other trauma survivors. So, Dr. Morris, I know we've talked before, and I've seen in your work that you, actually, you were just at a 5K for Haven, which Haven is a nonprofit organization that helps survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. I, for one, am a huge supporter of Haven. In fact, they're a partner of ours in the Trauma Survivor Ambassador Program, because we want to support organizations that are supporting survivors. So tell me a little bit about that 5K and why you went there to support Haven.
Yes, so I have a connection to domestic violence because tragically my aunt was actually murdered in her home, and it was kind of the escalation of a domestic violence situation with her daughter and the father of their children. And I think he just retaliated because my cousin had finally decided to leave him. And so I have volunteered with Haven a few times, and I love the work that they're doing. And I think it's very important work, and they need financial support to continue the work. So I saw that Prefix, which is a company based out of Rochester Hills, they hosted this 5K. They do it annually, and they pick a different charity every year. So this year, their charity was Haven. So I went and I did the 1 mile walk with my son, and it was a great turnout and really a great time to be there. It was a very reflective walk. I even posted on my social media that during the whole walk, I was thinking about my aunt and her life. And that's why I was there to support, because I feel like we have to really put support around this community of people so that we don't keep losing people to issues around domestic violence.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And first of all, I am so sorry for your loss. That had to be a very traumatic experience for your entire family. But that brings up a huge point that I want to bring up, is typically leaving a domestic violence situation can be the scariest time. It can be the most dangerous time, correct? And that kind of sounds like what happened. So do you have any advice for anyone that's going through a domestic violence situation now that is looking to get out, that would hopefully be able to keep them safe?
Yes, I would say that utilize support services. I wouldn't just outright leave. I would reach out to people in the community that you know provide support and services and ask them what's the best and safest way to leave. I will also not inform your partner or the person who's abusing you of your plans, because that can also make their actions escalate if they know what you're trying to do. So just really being strategic and intentional about how you get out and making sure that you have a plan in place to be able to do that.
That is important key. Like you said, do not give notice to your abuser because it absolutely can escalate. I personally know about a handful of people that it was kind of a similar situation where they were getting ready to leave, and it escalated. So speaking of Haven, I know that they have a crisis line and they help people come up with a safety plan for leaving. And so I know that that resource is available. And I'm a huge believer in too, like leaving a violent situation like that can feel very isolating. You feel very alone. And so I always say, get as many resources as you can, like kind of like build your own army of people, whether it be counselors, it's places like Haven. There are so many different ones out there, advocates, mentors, anything like that. When you start getting really strong advocates on your side, you really feel the strength to make such a scary move, right? So going back to your aunt, how old were you when that happened?
I believe that was like 5 or 6 years ago. So I was in my mid 20s.
How has that trauma shaped you today?
Well, I think it has really informed and inspired my work that I do as a researcher, as a professor at Michigan State. I was actually in the middle of collecting my data for my dissertation when this happened. So it's really kind of ironic because the things that I was interviewing and talking to people that I was interviewing for my dissertation, the things that they were going through with their family members who had just been killed was some of the same things that my family was going through. And so it really has inspired my work. That's kind of how I deal with what happened to us, is I put a purpose behind it. So my research focuses on the impact of trauma and community violence in Black neighborhoods, which is still a huge issue today. And I talk to people who are the survivors, so people like me who have had someone who has been murdered, and talk about like the aftermath of what happens and all the systems they have to interact with and everything that they go through, and try to figure out ways that we can really help this population of individuals because the support is really lacking. And so that's how I deal with it. I put a purpose behind it, and it really has inspired the work that I'm doing because I feel like that's the best way to honor my aunt's life.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great mission, is putting turning your pain into purpose. So you said you talked to other survivors, and you know, I just I commend you for the work that you're doing because it's not easy. It could be very triggering for you. I mean, you went through this experience, but yet to go out there and connect yourself with other survivors that went through a similar situation, it takes a lot of guts, it takes a lot of bravery. So how do you do that? How do you still work in that environment, that similar trauma, without getting triggered?
Well, I think it really comes down to taking care of yourself. So I have a hobby, like as you can see my sash, I participate in pageants. So that kind of helps keep my spirits uplifted. I have my family, I have my husband and my son, and they kind of help me stay uplifted. And I just find ways to take care of myself. I have my connection to God. I'm heavily involved in my church. So that also keeps me uplifted. So I do all of those different things to just make sure I'm, taking care of myself. That's the biggest thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, self-care is so extremely important. And, you know, one of the reasons why the trauma survivor program even started is because I'm a huge believer in the more we share our story and the more we talk about it, the stronger we get, right? And then the less triggered we get as well. So do you find that to be true? The more you share your story, the stronger you get?
Yeah, definitely. It is like a healing process and a freeing process. I find that even when I talk to other people, that's what they share, that it helps to be able to talk it out, and especially with someone who may have gone through similar things, to you, it's definitely like a healing and a freeing process for sure.
So what message, I heard you say that, like, okay, so you talked to other survivors that gone through maybe losing somebody in a domestic violence situation that was murdered. Tell me what you have found, like either in your research as a professor or just in conversation with other survivors that you find may be like a common struggle for those survivors.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is finding adequate support. So for a lot of the people that I interviewed, they have lost someone to homicide. And so some of them have tried to reach out and get like clinical support. And so most of the time the clinicians don't look like them. And so they don't really have an understanding of the context of like violence in the Black community. And so a lot of times they make a lot of assumptions, or even some of the people I interview have, told me like hurtful things or stereotypes that the clinicians have made. So that's kind of a huge barrier, is being able to find clinicians of color who understand the context and are able to really provide them the support they need. The other big barrier is just like having access to additional supports. So, for example, one person who I talked with when I was actually interning as an MSW, I was placed in the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office in Detroit, and she was talking about how her fiance at the time, he was killed, but he was killed inside of their vehicle. But that was the only vehicle that they owned in the family. But the police had to keep it for investigative purposes. And sometimes they keep those vehicles for weeks and months at a time. And not so that meant that their family had no transportation anymore. And so those are things that you just don't expect because it's a sudden death, it's unexpected. And so I think, there are no really supports in place that can kind of assist people with that. And so those are probably the two biggest barriers. And then another thing is that a lot of these cases are unsolved. They go years and years and years with being unsolved. And after it's been on the docket for 1 year, it becomes a cold case. And once it becomes a cold case, the chances of it being solved go significantly down if you don't have any leads within that first year. And so a lot of families are never going to get the closure they desire because the person who has done the crime, even if the family knows who did it, because sometimes they would know, because it was like, even in my case, it's a family member. We knew this person. Even if you know the person, that doesn't always guarantee that they're going to be convicted for the crime. In my family's case, he was convicted and he is serving a life sentence. But that doesn't always happen for families either. So then that's another issue that they have to deal with, is dealing with the fact that this tragedy happened and now we can't get closure because that part of it has not been taken care of.
Thank you for sharing those barriers. And my next question is going to be, what can we do as a society to kind of overcome some of those barriers? But I think it's ironic that you just mentioned, like, a lot of people don't get closure because they can't solve the case or anything like that. And today I'm actually wearing a shirt from the Trauma Survivor Ambassador Collection, which is a whole nother thing I won't get into right now. But every time a shirt is purchased, it supports nonprofits such as Haven, and we're working with a few other ones as well. So every time you buy a shirt, you get to choose an organization to support, and 10% of that goes to that organization. But this one in particular, it says "Rising from the Ashes," but in the back is a quote from my daughter, which unfortunately passed away when she was 20, and she went through a lot of trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, addiction. And when she was going to court with her abuser, and it was right before sentencing, her and I were doing a seminar. We called it the Hope and Jamie Show. And we were talking about all the different things that her and I have been through as mother and daughter, and the abuse that we both have gone through, the addictions that we both have gone through. I have 11 years sobriety, and she was working on her sobriety. And someone in the audience had asked her, they said her name was Hope, and they said, "Hope, do you feel like when he gets sentenced that you're going to feel like you got justice in your closure? How's that going to feel?" And she was so young, but yet she looked at that audience member and she said, "You will never get justice or closure until you heal from within." And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so amazing. And I remember I looked at her, my jaw just kind of dropped, like, because we didn't, like, when we did these seminars, we didn't practice them because I'm all about being authentic and just having conversations. But girl, we got in the car and on the ride home, I looked at my daughter and I said, do you understand the power behind that? Because so many wait on a justice system to feel like they got their justice, or they wait on an ex partner to give them closure. Like, why did they do that to me? I just want them to explain. Why didn't they love me? I just need an explanation. And you're looking for your abuser to give you your closure, and it's never going to happen. And when you said that you get closure when you heal from within, you are keeping all your power. That means you're not giving it away, because if you're waiting on a justice system, if you're waiting on an ex-partner or whoever, if they don't give it to you, you go the rest of your life feeling like you were robbed. If you can tell yourself, I don't need others to give me that. That if I do the healing and I heal from within, that's when I get my justice. That means no one can give it to you, but guess what? Nobody can take it away from you either. And so I had it put on the back of the shirt, that quote, because I think it's so important for people to learn from that stop looking for outside sources to give you that justice or to give you that closure. You have that within you have that. When you heal, when you talk about your story and you share, that's your opportunity to get your justice. Growing after trauma, thriving after surviving, all of those ways are the ways you're going to get justice. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's so important for people to start looking within, because healing from something like a homicide within a family, and then to not, I mean, thank goodness they were able to get your aunt's perpetrator behind bars. But like you said, there's so many that don't get that. So hopefully that they can take that away. But going back to those barriers, how can us as a society help overcome those barriers? Those are pretty strong barriers. What can we do?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is gaining an understanding of all that this community goes through. So I think education is one of the biggest things, so that you can show up in spaces and be able to support. I think another thing is that we have to improve the relationship between the police department, criminal justice system, and Black communities for sure, because they have to interact with each other a lot in these situations. And so I've seen some efforts that have started to happen where they're coming together in safe spaces and talking. And so that's good. It has to start from somewhere. And I think the other thing is really like financial support. There are some organizations that exist that are trying to do community violence intervention work in Black neighborhoods. And I think continuing to support them in the work that they're doing is going to be really important in the years to come.
Do you know of any organizations off the top of your head that are doing that kind of work, so people can kind of look into them and maybe support? Because I think that's it. It's, we as one person may not be able to make a huge impact, but if we can support organizations that are already established and they're doing that kind of work, like, how can we jump in and help them? Maybe let's either donate, or
Yes.
let's have some news media on them, or to bring awareness to their work. There's so many, we can have events. So what are some organizations that are doing that work that you just mentioned?
Yes, so one of them is called Force Detroit, FORCE Detroit. They have an Instagram page and I believe a website as well. They have programming in certain targeted neighborhoods of Detroit. And then there's another organization called Crime Stoppers in Detroit, and they actually give a lot of support to family members in helping them trying to find the perpetrator. And they do things beyond that, but that's kind of like one of their main goals. So those are two organizations that you can look up and support.
So who would reach out to Crime Stoppers or this other organization? Would it be somebody that has been victimized, that needs support getting justice for their crime, or getting, like, tell me a little bit more about those programs and who would utilize them?
Yeah, so Force Detroit is does a lot of community violence intervention work. So they host different like workshops and seminars And so you can either be someone who had a loved one who was killed, or you can be a victim of violence yourself and maybe you survived. And then for Crime Stoppers, they kind of work with family members and friends of someone who was already killed. So they're helping people get ads on billboards or get a segment on the news media. So those are the type of people that will be reaching out to them.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I'll have you shoot me some links or something, and when this
Yeah.
gets posted, I'll make sure to put those links in there. So if anyone out there listening is able to support these wonderful organizations, please, please take the time to look into them and show your support where you can. So thank you. I think it's really important to bring awareness to these kind of organizations because a lot of us just don't know about them. And that just shows the amazing work that you're doing as just a human being and everything that you're doing. I wanted to go back to your mission again. And like you mentioned, you do these pageants, and I know part of that is for healing, but tell us a little bit about your personal mission and how we can support you in your mission. As far as like Mrs. Michigan Captivating, I know you've done some fundraising for that. So tell us a little bit more about how you got involved with that, what you're taking away from being part of such a program, and how we can support you.
Yeah, so my title is through the National Captivating Pageants, which is based out of Columbus, Ohio. I have actually been involved with this system for many years now. I am competing as a Mrs. this Labor Day weekend, but 5 years ago, I actually competed as a Miss and I was crowned National Miss Captivating. And I was the first African American woman to hold the title. And so I take a lot of pride in that. And my platform is actually called Empower Her. And it's all about inspiring the next generation of women to reach their fullest potential. So this past school year, I worked with an organization in Detroit called Women of Tomorrow, and they are placed in 55 high schools in Metro Detroit. And they really focus on trying to mentor women, young girls in high school, giving them career advice, life advice. And then they also have a scholarship fund. So I was able to host a fundraising event this past year to raise money to go towards their scholarship fund, which usually gets awarded to high school seniors in the program. And they have a bunch of different scholarships. And so that's really my mission and goal when I'm doing pageantry, is to really be a light and motivation to other young women after me that they can achieve anything that they put their mind to.
Wow. That's phenomenal. I'm just kind of speechless because the work that you're doing is beyond incredible. And you're probably changing lives that you don't even realize that you're changing. And every time you speak or you stand up and you get involved in these organizations, you're keeping that going, and people are looking up to you, like again, going from this trauma that you had in your family and stuff, from that to going to pageants it takes an incredible amount of work in healing and just making a decision. Like I'm huge on just saying you just have to make a choice to not live at the effect of your life, right? And it sounds to me like you did that. As hard as it was, at some point you have to say, okay, I have to keep moving forward. And how can I, again, like you said, turn my pain into purpose? So again, you'll have to send me the information on that program as well, because the more we can get these organizations out there and who they support and what they do, hopefully we can bring support to them, because those that support, they're like caretakers, right? They need care too, and they need the support. So thank you again for sharing, all of these organizations, which I've only heard of one out of all that you have spoken about today. So I think it's just incredible that you're working so closely with these programs. I want to ask you, what tips do you have for survivors that are dealing with trauma, and it doesn't have to just be domestic violence. Trauma it could be grief, the loss of a loved one like your family went through. It could be getting diagnosed with life altering illness. It can be anything that has just flipped your world upside down. um, a divorce can be very traumatic. So what what advice do you have for survivors of any kind of trauma on how to not live at the effect of their trauma?
I would just say that if you've gone through any type of trauma, that you really have to learn how to focus on yourself and determine the best thing that's going to help you move forward in your life. You don't want to get stuck trying to just relive the trauma over and over again or not really find healing from it. And so, whether it's finding some meditation or joining a community focused a support group with people who have gone through the same thing as you, or starting an organization, whatever it is that's going to be your thing. I really think you have to figure that out so that you can continue to live your life and not let it plague you. So, really, just like finding purpose and meaning behind what happened to you is very key for being able to heal and move forward. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
Now that's wonderful. Just like the healing, the either whether they're journaling or they're meditating, anything like that can be very, very calming. Not getting stuck, putting yourself first. It is so hard for people that have gone through trauma, especially family trauma, because everybody in the family is grieving. They're having the feels too. So how do you focus on yourself during those times? But I appreciate just your insights and your inspiration. And I'm hoping that we can get this across to many, many people, because I think what you stand for, after everything that you've been through and all the challenges that you've had to face, for you to overcome them and be thriving the way you are. I know you're married, you have a little boy, you're a mother. I mean, you wear so many hats, right? How do you find the balance in all of that?
I think that I'm still learning to do that even as we speak today. And so it's really been about learning how to give myself a lot of grace and take things one day at a time. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yes.
And sometimes you're going to be better in one area than you are in another. And you just have to learn how to sit with that and know that you go through different phases in your life.
Right. No, that's genius. And I feel that when someone wears many hats like you do, and I wear a lot of hats as well, not only giving yourself grace, giving yourself permission to have down times. You know, a lot of people feel guilty if they take a day off, or they just take a day for themselves to literally not shower, not do anything, just sit on the couch and hit Netflix. You know, they feel guilty about that. It's like your body is telling you, your nervous system is telling you, you need to slow down. And just owning that and being able to say, like, no, I need to take time for me. Like, I have a hat too, the me hat, and I need to fill that. And the other thing is, like you said, sometimes you're better at one thing than you are the other. It's learning to do things without perfection as well. Like I always said, I told you this before I started hitting record. Like, this doesn't have to be perfect. I like it to be authentic. I don't care if we mess up. You know, like, I just want it to be real. It does not have to be perfect. And that's how I live my life. I go out and I do public speaking. I am not a Mel Robbins. I am not Brene Brown, right? But I have a message and I want to get it out. So not being able to be perfect or even really, really good at it doesn't stop me, because to me, getting the message out is more important than how great of a job I did. As long as that message was received, then I did my job. So when you're wearing many hats or you're healing from some sort of trauma, yes, giving yourself grace, giving yourself permission to just be, sometimes taking the day off, asking for help, learning to say no. These are all things, and especially when you're healing from trauma. I'm a huge believer that no matter what trauma you've gone through, you go through a grief process. So even leaving a toxic relationship, an abusive relationship, you will grieve because we've loved that person and it doesn't just shut off, right? We have normalized our life so we could survive being in that toxic relationship. So leaving and starting over, we do grieve our abuser. I know a lot of people out there don't understand it, but we do. We grieve the person we thought they were. We grieve the life that we thought we were going to have. So a lot of complications come into that grieving process. We get angry, we get exhausted, we're in denial. So my last question I have for you in regards to like survivors, it goes back to your family going through such a traumatic trauma. What advice do you have for family members that have a loved one going through trauma? How can we be better supporters to our family and our friends when they are going through something that was traumatic for them?
That's a good question. I think just showing up and being present. You don't always have to say something, but just being there and them knowing that they have access to you, because sometimes they might not be able to vocalize what's going on. And then also being very vigilant and observant about their behaviors. And if you see something that is concerning, not being afraid to speak up and say, okay, maybe we need to escalate this and you really need to go, get this type of help. They also have support groups now for individuals who are supporting people going through trauma. They do have those as well. And because it can be a lot on not only the person that's going through the trauma, but the people that are supporting them. So you have to take care of yourself too. So I would say just really showing up, being aware, being observant, being vigilant is going to be really important when you're supporting somebody who's going through trauma.
I love that. Thank you for answering that. Yes, being vigilant is definitely key. It can be a very frustrating process when you are trying to support somebody and they're not ready yet. That is so difficult. I've seen it in addiction. I've seen it in toxic relationships. I've been in both where my family members, no matter what they said, did anything, my daughter went through it, no matter what I said or did, I couldn't get her to get out of the situation until she was ready. One thing I want to add to that is, as a family member, if you see someone going through a domestic violence type situation or addiction, anything like that, that you're trying to support, is even writing a list of organizations that can help. Because when they're ready, you will have this list, because it is a small window before they change their mind sometimes. It's a very small window. And one time I called around, I was trying to get my daughter into like a rehab that helped with mental health issues as well. Because of her abuse, she had mental health issues. And I called 64 places all over the United States in 2 days and got no, sorry, we can't help you. We have nothing available. You can't afford it. It was one rejection after another after another, and it was devastating. And I just couldn't imagine if it were me trying to get the help. I was the one going through it at that time, not being able to call somewhere and get like immediate help after the first or second rejection. I'm done. Your mind is so overwhelmed and so full of trauma that you can't even fathom to keep calling. It's like, forget it. It's hard, but getting better just seems harder to me. Like I can't even get any help. So having a list of, of organizations that when they're ready, that you can be like, here you go. Here's a list of things, like here's Haven. They can help you get safety plan going. If there is a criminal case going or somebody that needs like a PPO, they give PPOs. They also do forensic exams. So my daughter actually had to use Haven when her abuser brutally assaulted her on her 18th birthday and he strangled her. I was grateful because the officer had referred us to Haven. And so we actually went there for a forensic exam. It was just such a better environment than going to an emergency room. And you really felt like you were talking to somebody that had experience in this specific thing, rather an ER doctor that just in and out, here to see you, gone. They just treated her so kindly and with such compassion. They treated her, like she was human. So yeah, having those available. So please, when you get a moment, send me all those links. And if, you want to share your link to your Instagram, things like that, because I know just from talking to you in the last 30 minutes, um, you're just an incredible lady. And I think everything you said makes so much sense. And I think so many people are going to relate to it. Hopefully, will want to support your mission and some of the mission of the other organizations that you mentioned. But follow you, because I follow you and I love everything you're doing. It's incredible, the work. I mean, you literally have boots on the ground. You're not just sitting here doing podcasts, you're out doing the work. And I think that's incredibly impressive. And I just want to tell you that I admire you. I admire the work that you're doing. I hope that the strength and the grit stay with you, because you are definitely making a difference in this world. I appreciate you immensely, immensely for being a trauma survivor ambassador, because I think your story matters. I think your voice matters. And I think you have a story and a mission that so many people need to hear about. And so thank you for taking that on. Do you have anything that you want to tell the audience or share with the audience before we close?
I would say thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm very honored to serve in this ambassador role, and I'm grateful to you for all the work that you're doing and spearheading this. I know it's not easy for you either, and everything that you've been through. I want to commend you on that and thank you for being a leader and a pioneer in this space. I would just say that if you all want to find me on social media, you can follow me. Kendall the Model Scholar is my name on both Facebook and Instagram. But thank you so much for this time and being able to talk with you.
You're welcome. It's been absolutely my pleasure. So, Dr. Morris, tell us, when is Nationals coming up so we can all be cheering and rooting for you? I know it's coming up soon.
Yes, it is. It will be this Labor Day weekend. So that's August 29th through the 31st. And the final competition is on Sunday evening, the 31st,
So,
in
is there a way
Columbus,
to tune
Ohio.
in to watch it, or
Yeah, so on the Captivating Pageants Facebook and Instagram, they will usually go live, and so you can watch the pageant live from the social media accounts.
that's amazing. Well, we wish you the best of luck. You've done it once. You can do it again as
Yeah,
Mrs. this time. Most importantly, have so much fun and reflect on
thank you.
all this amazing work that you have done that has gotten you to where you're at today. I will connect with you again soon, and we'll just keep this partnership going and
Yeah.
see what kind of positive impact that we can have. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to listen to Dr. Morris today and all the great advice that she has. I mean, real life advice. She has lost an aunt to domestic violence. Her whole family was devastated and had to grieve together. They had to deal with a lot of barriers. I appreciate that she was very vulnerable and real. If you love to hear about stories like this and are looking for inspiration, or tips and tools on how to heal from your own trauma survivor experience, please like and subscribe. We have many more ambassadors that will be also sharing their story, and we love for you to follow along and help us make an impact. Thank you. We will see you soon for episode 3.